giant robots smashing into other giant robots.
This is the Giant Robots Smashing into Other Giant Robots podcast, where we explore the design, development, and business of great products. I'm your host, Chad Pytel, and I'm joined today by Jason Stadther, Director of Engineering at TrueCar. Jason, thanks so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Chad. Happy to be here.
So why don't we get started by giving folks a brief overview of what TrueCar is, in case they're not familiar.
Yeah, if you haven't heard of it, it's been around a while. It's a vehicle marketplace helping people save time, money, find the right car for you. Excellent at showing you what other people have paid for cars. You know what a realistic price that you're going to pay before going in, helping connect you with dealers. But yeah, been in the marketplace a long time, and hopefully we'll be in the marketplace a long time going forward.
Yeah, hopefully. So you've been working on a bunch of interesting projects at TrueCar, and as I feel like every conversation these days is about AI and how different companies are integrating AI into both their operations and their products. And how has that come into play at TrueCar?
Yeah, so like every company out there, we're leaning into AI, and it's interesting the challenges of just explaining what that is, because AI it's such a ubiquitous term now for so many different things. So we just launched something recently that I'm super proud of, very cool. We call it motivated buyers, essentially a lead prediction model, but a machine learning model. And so explaining to folks what machine learning is and how that isn't wrapped up in AI. I guess it's all under the umbrella of AI, but machine learning is older technology, more established stuff. We've been out there for a while. So you have one of TrueCar's biggest assets is data. We have a ton of data. You train a model on that, and it's doing predictions based upon that data. So we built Motivated Buyers, which is a lead prediction engine. Because at its core, TrueCar is a lead prediction website. We help you save time, find the right car, and then we match you up with a dealer that can hopefully sell you that car. And one of the biggest pain points for dealers is, same thing. We want to save consumers time. We also want to save dealers time. One of the biggest time wasters for them is people who are not ready to buy a car, people that are just shopping around, just wanted to see a price, things like that. So how do you separate the folks that are serious about buying a car, that do want to buy a car right now? And that's where motivated buyers come in. So we take, I think it's up to like 50, 60 different things that you do on our site. That's consumer actions, that's market data, that's the price of the vehicle, how popular the vehicle is, all kinds of fun data goes in to this lead prediction model, and it's measured against the sales data. Because that's one of the things that TrueCar has that our competitors don't have, is we have a robust sales matching pipeline. So we know every car sold at one of our dealers. We also know cars sold outside of our dealers. So we know what people are actually paying for cars. Because I think everybody knows that a lot of times the price you see on the website is not what people are paying at the actual dealership. Well, TrueCar knows that. So since we know what people are buying and how much they're paying, and we know what they're doing on our site, we've got the perfect recipe to combine that, train a model on that, and do a prediction on the likelihood that you take these sort of actions on our site. That means you're serious. That means you're likely to convert to buy a car. So motivated buyers, it's rather than show dealers just a raw score of this is the likelihood we think someone's going to convert, we want to take all that data, distill it down to something that's easy to understand. So we do that by just tagging them as motivated buyers. This is someone that's highly likely to actually buy a car. So we've been running this for a couple months now. The statistics show that a motivated buyer is more than twice as likely to buy a car that someone that isn't. They buy a car 15% faster, so less time to sale. So when a dealer sees a motivated buyer lead come in, we're hoping they take that seriously. That's a real car. That's a real lead. That's someone that wants to buy a car right now. But tying it back to the whole AI conversation, explaining this and all the magic behind it and everything that goes in without, because I can't explain all the 50 different parameters that go into it, all the different proprietary logic we have, that threshold for what qualifies a motivated buyer.
Right.
They don't want to know all that. So explaining that without getting it tied into, this isn't just a chat bot. This isn't just Chat GPT taking a wild guess of someone. There's real science behind this. This is proven technology in machine learning.
This is actually going back to what we were saying about the different, people not understanding. There was a point in time where at thoughtbot, all of our web pages, everything, we tried to be super precise, and we said machine learning everywhere. And we found that people didn't understand the distinction that that and so at some point we just sort of made the call to just switch to using the term AI everywhere from a marketing perspective
Yeah,
because it was an argument that wasn't worth having on our marketing pages.
makes sense.
um, and it just wasn't resonating with people. Now, when we actually start a conversation and start talking through things, we can understand what are you actually trying to accomplish? What are the features? Oh, the right solution to this is not generative AI, it's another kind of machine learning. Um, but yeah, and I think that, I think you could make an argument either way, but from a marketing perspective, it's clear that the term AI has just become this umbrella term that almost doesn't mean what it originally meant.
Yeah. Yeah. And to the, I was listening to your last podcast and you were talking about how confident are you, how perfect will AI get at certain tasks? And you talked about
Mhm.
coding, and it will get very good, very accurate at coding. But for the non-engineers, the general public, a lot of them associate AI with just hallucinations. And that's the
Right,
common theme, and they don't trust it. When is it telling the truth? When is it not?
right. Did you face that resistance with, I guess, dealers?
It, we didn't. So luckily, the TrueCar dealer network, we have about 9,000 dealers on our network. They are all
Mhm.
very forward-thinking folks. They want to embrace technology. It was more just the questions on our side. So we've got a lot of former sales associates, people that worked at dealerships here. So when we started pitching this idea, some of the interesting questions came up that I would have never thought of as an engineer. I'm thinking, this is the golden goose. I'm handing you a crystal
Mhm.
ball to tell you which people are actually going to buy a car. Who wouldn't want that information? Because in some of our tests, like I said, motivated buyers twice as likely. But so just for context, like across the industry, the average close rate between us, all our competitors, anywhere between 5-10% is the likelihood when someone submits their information to a dealership. That's the likelihood that they're going to buy a car. With some of the stuff we were seeing, the folks we tag as motivated buyers were like some of our more uh, well what's the word I'm looking for here, dealerships that are more effective in selling cars. We're seeing close rates like 25,
Yeah.
30%. Like, you know,
I can totally see that, by the way, just like anecdotally as a customer, not that I buy cars all the time, but like there's a difference between the point where you're like, I'm going to buy a car this weekend and I'm doing research.
yeah,
And being able to flag that I'm done with my research and I'm going to buy a car this weekend, that's super powerful.
yeah, yep. And I think, side topic for this, but if like there are a lot of lead generation sites out there, there's, Zillow, there's NerdWallet, all of those at their core are lead generation sites. If they're
Mhm.
not doing this already, like they should be, everyone should have robust, like machine learning prediction models that are guessing the likelihood that someone converts to a sale or to an action to a certain thing.
Yeah. So what questions were people having?
It was
They were
more
just
along, so the unfortunately the car buying process hasn't improved much in the past 20 years despite our best efforts, and we are making big progress, but a lot of it is just that whole mentality of this is the way we've done it and we don't want to change. So
Mhm.
the thought was, like I said, I'm handing you this crystal ball, and some of our dealer folks were saying, well, the way in which they assign leads to salespeoples at the dealers, have you thought about that? Will there be cherry picking of
Mhm.
why is Jenny getting all the motivated buyer leads and Tom is not? Like you've got this system of how do dealers associate this new this new feature into their existing assignment process? How do you separate those out so that you don't get dealers that only want to reach out to motivated buyers?
Right.
Because part of it is we don't want to encourage dealers to discriminate against people. There are those folks that are not motivated buyers that are very much going to buy a car. I don't want them
Right.
to be ignored. So how do you work this into the existing process? And that was an interesting conversation we had. And luckily we have a lot of great dealer partners, and we work with them on how do we train them, how do we incorporate this. But it was very much a learning process for my part because as engineers, we just want to solve problems,
Right.
and sometimes we don't understand the impact of how that will change people's workflows.
I think that that's not only true in products in general, but I think we're facing that a lot with integrating machine learning and AI into projects, really taking a step back before we do that and looking holistically at the like making sure it's fit from an ethical perspective, but also understanding the ramifications of it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, like pivoting that over to just us in our industry and
Hmm.
leveraging AI assisted coding. It's how do you implement that without changing your workflows too much? So yeah, uh, pivoting to another topic of that, like I was just talking to some colleagues about the our most senior engineers sometimes are the slower ones to adopt AI assisted coding. They know the code the most, but they may not know all the best tricks with the tools. Whereas our
Hmm.
the more junior engineers that are starting to come up on assisted AI assisted programming, like they know the tools, but not as familiar with the code. So you have this weird balance of, hearing you talk about how you approach AI, you're having it write test cases first. You're doing test driven
Hmm.
development, and then you're reviewing everything that is writing. And that's sort of how our senior engineers are doing it, but there may not be experts at generating the right prompts of using the
Right.
planning mode first and really reviewing everything. They're biting off the small chunks. So it's like, how do you envision we're going to meet them in the middle of take our junior engineers, have them not become so reliant on code and prompts that they're not actually on relying on AI, that they're not
Right.
actually reviewing and understanding the code anymore.
So I assume you've solved it. You have the answers.
No, not at all.
How big is the TrueCar engineering team?
I think we have about 80 in product and
Mhm.
tech now.
Do you tend to be, and no judgment, but there's certain team cultures where they prescribe everything, like editors, that kind of thing, and there's other where it's basically use whatever you want. What camp does TrueCar fall into?
Whatever works. So we've got people
Yeah.
using Vim. We've got people using Cursor. Probably Cursor is the most adopted IDE, but yeah, VS Code, Vim, Cursor kind of spans the spectrum.
Yeah. So how have you navigated this in terms of supporting people down a path that seems to work for both seniors and juniors?
Slack channels, people
Hmm.
sharing best practices, what I've learned, horror stories, success stories, like you guys having in our repo, having a shared like Claude MD AI context
Yeah.
file for both the
Yeah.
front end repo, back end repo with our best practices. I know you guys maintain one that you share publicly. We've looked at that as well, but um, yeah, for the most part, those are the two angles there.
Yeah. The other thing that we've done in addition is like having lunch and learn kind of things where someone specifically gives an internal demo or talk, and that's actually how AI and focus got started. Was I was doing those internally, and then I was like, you know what would make this even more powerful is to do it externally as well. um, so that kind of knowledge sharing has been good. And then we've always been big fans of pairing on things together. We don't pair 100% of the time, but we pair, oh, we're working on something new or we're working on something interesting or particularly challenging. They've always been great ways of leveling people up in terms of skills and techniques and that kind of thing. And it's still true when it comes to these new tools and techniques.
Yeah. Yeah, we do. We have something called lightning talks that I've run at TrueCar. Same thing, same concept, short 5-minute presentations. Yeah, we've had a few of those on, people's success stories, usually with AI. Let me ask you another question then. So there's been talk at certain companies of that the most junior level engineer, the entry level engineer, that role is being replaced by AI. That a lot of companies
Right.
aren't hiring entry level folks anymore, straight out of college. They're only hiring mid and senior level engineers. What are your thoughts? Do you think thoughtbot will
Well,
continue hiring entry level engineers?
we're in a little bit of a special case because we haven't really ever hired entry level people. In fact, because of our general standards being high and expectations from clients, we also created the apprenticeship program and that really wasn't even about entry level. It was more like taking mid level to senior. So most people who did it didn't join us from college. They had been working for 2, 3, 4 years as a developer and were ready to go from mid to thoughtbot. But I still think the framework and the sort of philosophy is very valid, which is, if you don't figure out how to support those people and bring them up, you never have the seniors that you need. And I think as an industry, we've got to figure that out, because assuming, uh, I still think developers will have a place. And so if you don't figure out how to adequately make entry level or junior people seniors, if you never give them the opportunity because you stop hiring at that level, then there's going to be a cliff.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, from my perspective, I don't think it's replaced entry level engineers at this point. I think we've all seen this. When you bring a new engineer into your code base, into your company, they bring a fresh perspective, right? They
Yeah.
see things that you haven't seen before. We've gotten used to this is just the way how we do things. These are the patterns we follow. You bring someone new and they start asking questions, and you're like, I never really thought about that. It's just been the way we always do it. I
Right.
think that's a very critical point for like the most junior folks as well that are coming up in this whole AI assisted program. They are going to challenge us to think about how we approach programming and tech in general differently.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, like there's, the analogy may not be the best one that I use is, calculators didn't replace math teachers. AI is not going to replace engineers. I don't think at any level. When I started really leading into like AI assisted coding, I was comforted by the fact that, oh yeah, if I was completely non-technical, this would be much harder to do. I'd be burning through
Mhm.
tokens left and right because I'd just be saying it doesn't work, fix it. Whereas like I know, like, let me follow this code path. This is like, because I got into an instance with one recently, where it just, something wasn't working. It's just constantly making code changes because it's making
Yeah.
code changes to dead code that's never being called. And it didn't
Right.
realize that until I start tracing back, putting in breakpoints and like, yeah, this code's never being called. That's why you're never fixing the problem. And like 2 iterations of that, I could have just been burning through tokens forever and it never would have been fixed.
Yeah. 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 And I think I agree with you. I think things will continue to improve, but um, there will always be there's so much software that needs to be built. It would basically, there's no end to the amount of products and software and everything that needs to be built. So these tools are going to make us more productive, but they're not going to um, completely eliminate developers.
Yeah. Yeah. The one other like conundrum I see in the future that I'm curious to hear your thoughts on is, so with the, I hate to say death or just decline of Stack Overflow, the trusted, the loved and slash hated resource that we all had growing up as
Yeah.
engineers, where you have this problem to find out someone asked the same question 2 years ago and then comments a month later that just says, never mind, I fixed it myself, and never posts the solution. I think we've all run into pain like that.
Yeah.
But so that was, what trained a lot of these models on how to write code. So what happens when a new library, a new tool comes out that no human has written code patterns for yet? There's just the documentations. How is AI going to write code for that? And the scary part is it just will, right? How many times have you ever seen Claude come back and say, I don't know? Like, I don't know how
Right.
to do this. It's very rare. It's going to write
Right.
code for it and just tell you that this is how it should be when it might not be. And that's where, like,
Yeah.
if you don't understand the code, it can be dangerous.
We actually had that happen. It was sort of meta because it was especially funny, which was, we were taking something that existed and using an agent, um, and we wanted to. It was talking to OpenAI. We wanted to switch it to Gemini, uh, but at the time, Google had just released new libraries for the its models, and so the agent had no idea what the new libraries looked like. And so it just went off on a complete hallucination of APIs that didn't exist. It was really remarkable to watch.
Yeah.
That being said, it is one area that is better since then, because oftentimes what we're seeing now is the agent will go and look for documentation and read it in as context, which is helpful.
Yeah, I think that's going to be something I'll be watching out for, of just, yeah, new patterns coming out. How does it understand them?
To build on your point, like so much of what we build is on top of libraries, open source or not. And if those libraries are generated, that's not gonna lead like I think that's a place where people still have something significant to contribute, is to those sort of foundational libraries that we all build upon.
Yeah. Yeah, and like how that, you've probably heard about Tailwind. They had a big reduction in force just because,
Right.
documentation. People don't need as thorough of documentation as they did previously. Yeah, I don't know how that works. Tying this back to, I just recently did a blog post about that, about the whole UCP, the Universal Commerce Protocol that Google
Hmm.
and Shopify just launched. That whole of, I think I titled my blog post, "The Internet Isn't for You Anymore." How agents are changing the way we browse the web, and like how, the what was it? The one blog post I referenced in there is by the gentleman named Dries. He's the founder of Drupal. He titled it "The Third Audience." So
Hmm.
historically, websites have had two audiences. They have had humans, Google search crawlers. Well, now there's a third audience. AI agents are that third
Yes.
audience, because there was a statistic I quote in there that I'm a part of, that 44% of users now say that AI is their primary search tool. And that's me. I'm rarely going and just typing into Google anymore for a search. I'm asking
Hmm.
Gemini, I'm asking ChatGPT first. And so the next version of the internet we build won't be for us. We're going to build it for agents. So how do you build documentation? How do you build websites so agents can access them easily in the form that they want?
Yeah, I think that is a super interesting area. And I believe, or I think one conundrum is the tools are getting better very fast too at using human interfaces.
Yeah.
So, like, we could also find that we don't need to create special protocols, that we can actually just, mostly make things the way we normally would, and the machines will figure out how to use them. Uh, and it'll be a matter of like what happens faster. But for now, a lot of people, a lot of companies are thinking about this, and I think a lot of users are becoming much more comfortable with the idea that, I don't think they're necessarily comfortable with having the purchase be completed without them being in the loop at all. But it seems to me like people are much more comfortable with the idea that, it's basically taking one click buying from Amazon and giving it to everything in an agent.
Yeah, I'm with a lot of those people. I'd be a little nervous to just let it have free reign on my credit card, but add everything to the cart to me for me, and just send me a link, and I can click one button, and buy it all. Yeah, I'm down.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, the story I was talking about was just like my Home Depot experience, because it wasn't just until recently. Home Depot is one of the people that are bought into the Google Shopify UCP. So I guess for the folks that aren't familiar with this, um, so there's a protocol battle coming on. I reckon it to VHS versus Betamax, or like
Hmm.
Blu-ray versus HD DVD, in that um, most recently, I think it was 2 weeks ago, Google and Shopify launched what they call UCP, a Universal Commerce Protocol. Think of it as a standardized naming way of naming your endpoints, and the structure, the JSON structure that those endpoints return, specifically catered to AI agents, so that it knows what's the capability of your sites, where all your data is, how to walk people through the checkout flow. So Google Shopify launched theirs last. Amazon's working on theirs, like an agentic API as well, but more catered to just buying things on Amazon. And then OpenAI and Stripe were the first to market back in November of last year. So all this is like within the past couple of months. And theirs is, I think, more walled off. Like I equate it to the App Store, where you've got to register, and I think they're taking a cut of any sales. But essentially, that universally, we have to agree upon a standard JSON API structure and response specifically catered to agents to browse your data and walk a consumer through checkout. And yeah, it's who wins is going to be the real challenge there. And
Yeah. And actually, a thought occurs to me, which is something I was working on recently, is applicable to this, though, which is you're not wrong, but at the same time, these LLMs, these code generation tools, are very good at at adapting. And so you could have multiple protocols, and if what you're doing is coding with agents, they're probably going to be able to figure it out.
yeah, true. True. It kind of comes down to, like we were talking about, an agent doesn't need CSS. It doesn't need JavaScript. It just wants, like, if you could distill web pages down to just pure Markdown, it would be in heaven, right? That's all it really wants.
Yeah.
It will figure out CSS. It will figure out all the visual elements, but is that less efficient? Maybe. Same thing with if there's multiple different protocols, are you just burning through less tokens and you can have a lighter weight model if everything's standardized and it doesn't have to figure things out?
Yeah. And I'm a big proponent that, or part of my fundamental belief, I guess is the way to put it, is that, as these capabilities increase, a lot more stuff is going to be able to be done on simpler, more efficient models, many of which will eventually be able to run on our Macs.
Yeah.
And so that's really like interesting and exciting to me, like this idea of distilling things down as also capabilities increase. I think that's part of why we're going to get to the point where so much more is possible, because both ends of the spectrum are happening at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah, I love seeing like the various early adopters on like the subreddits that are doing that local LLMs. It reminds me very much of the crypto days when there were those people that just I'm just going all in. I'm going to put a rack of GPUs in my basement and I'm trying to get rich off this. And people are doing the same now. I'm seeing all these people taking pictures of racks in their office of like 10 different GPUs set up so they can run, a heavy duty model right on, out of their office. And I love those people for doing that, because they're the real ones that are figuring out how this is going to work. I'm never going to do that, but more power to them.
Right. But you can see this trajectory. That's why, like, it used to be that computers took up that much space that did meaningful things, and they got more efficient, they got more powerful, they shrunk in size, and now we have them on our laps. I can just see that trajectory happening again.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting of, like I said, how we are going to interact with the web in the next 10 years.
So how are you thinking about that at TrueCar? Obviously, it's not directly e-commerce. But how are you thinking about, building MCP into the product or something else?
Yeah, I mean, at some point, we've got to integrate, but we've launched some early chatbots years ago, and been talking about various angles of how we're going to approach it now. But it just makes sense because our goal is to simplify the car buying process down. Our motto is we want to save you time and money. Buying a car is not easy. Comparing all the different features between a car, looking at all the things that it comes with, just naming conventions. We have a pretty interesting pipeline now of just consolidating the names of what all the manufacturers call features. So you hear adaptive cruise control, but Toyota, Chevy, Ford, they all call it something else. Your driverless, maintain the distance cruise control, but every manufacturer has their own proprietary name for it. So we do our best to distill that down, but that's just a small piece of the confusion that consumers face of, okay, I'm like this car, I like this car, but to compare them isn't a straightforward task. So that's definitely
Hmm.
something like an LLM can help you just understand all the differences between cars, understand the complex process of fees and taxes. You see a lot of prices quoted from our competitors, and they don't dive into explaining all the granular fees and taxes. Especially, I live in California, and the list of fees and taxes that get applied when you buy a car is like 30 different things.
Hmm.
And a lot of our competitors don't show that, don't go into that detail, and I know why, because it's hard. It's hard for us to get
Right.
that data. It's hard for us to maintain that data, and it's hard for consumers to understand that data. So that's another area where just understanding everything that goes into buying a car.
This came up in an internal conversation at thoughtbot. It's like we're solving this hard problem that eventually is going to be consumed by the models and it's going to no longer be necessary for us to do it. And that leads to like, well, then why are we like, I think people react to it in different ways. You can sort of like be demoralized by it. And other people be like, oh no, that's progress. It allows us to focus on the next hard problem as a product company, as a company, as people. How do you think about it?
I mean, that's it. We live and breathe in like agile. We talk about releasing stuff in phases and iterating and always improving. That's what this is. Just because AI might be able to solve this problem easier or more efficiently than us in a year doesn't mean we shouldn't be solving it now. Um, you know, phase one, phase two, phase three, it doesn't matter. If you never built anything because you never built the first three phases because phase four might make them obsolete, then you're never going to build anything. You just constantly be waiting for the next big thing to come out. But yeah, it's the problems are tough to solve, and that's why I love working at TrueCar. That's why I love the automotive industry, because it seems like it should be such an easy problem to solve. You don't
Hmm.
negotiate for a gallon of milk. I know buying a car and buying a gallon of milk are different, vastly different things, but it shouldn't be this hard. There shouldn't be this sort of hidden unknown price that everyone thinks, and a lot of it is just consumer education as well. A lot of that of what we knew from previous generations, how our parents used to buy cars. My dad
Hmm.
loved negotiating for cars. He thought that was like winning. Me, like, I value my time. It
Yeah.
comes down to, what there's a lot of different car buyers and a lot of different people out there. And there are some that do want that. They want to win. They want the best deal that anyone's ever got. They want to be able to brag about the deal that they got to all their friends. But that
Yeah.
is, in my belief, the minority these days. Most people are just like me. I just don't want to get ripped off. I just want to pay what everybody else pays. I
Right.
don't need to spend 2, 3 days pitting dealers against each other to save $500. When you talk about cars cost $50,000 these days, I think is like the
Hmm.
average price for a new car. Is it really worth 2, 3 days of your time to save 1%? I mean, not for me. Like, you got to really value your time.
Right. Right. Yeah. But you're right. There is some people who just love it. Yeah. But I think that's, I mean, to bring it, like you were talking about the web, and I think that's one challenge is like, yeah, I think the web is dramatically changing, but I also really love the web. So it's like, yeah, maybe I'll be in the minority someday. I'll be the person who likes to browse the web, well, in the same way that people in the minority like to negotiate for their cars.
Well, it's like you talk about autonomous cars and cars just driving us everywhere.
Hmm.
But, I'll still keep a car that I still have a stick shift that I drive for fun, an old car that I keep around, and I will still drive for fun. Might be the same
Right.
thing with the internet. We will trust our agent to do most of the stuff, but every once in a while, I want to read the article myself. I want to watch
Yeah.
the YouTube video myself. I don't want you to summarize it for me. I want to ingest this content myself, because I still like writing blog posts. It's unfortunate how many blog posts I see these days. They're just 100% AI written,
Yeah.
and that saddens me, because I do like ingesting content that way. I do like hearing someone in their own words explain something to me.
I agree. I like to believe that there'll always be room, no matter what it is, for sort of enthusiasts, whether it be driving, the web. um, uh, yeah, there's always room for enthusiasts.
Yeah, and I think you're like me in that there will be times where something is broken in our code and I just want to trace it myself. I just want to solve this
Yeah.
problem myself. I could just copy paste the logs to AI and have it start debugging, but sometimes I just want to dive in and make sure I understand how this works under the hood as well.
I 100% agree. And I think that that's probably a good place to wrap up our conversation today.
Yep.
Jason, if folks want to get in touch with you or follow along, you've mentioned the blog, other things, where are all the places that they can do that?
Yeah, I post infrequently on my blog site. Is called scrumgeneer.com. And yeah, I post there, and every once in a while I'll post up. We do, like I was mentioning, we do lightning talks at TrueCar. So I'll post stuff from there, but it's on all range of topics: AI, technology, how to be a better engineering manager, all the common questions that we face in the engineering world.
Awesome. We'll include notes in the show notes. We'll include links to everything that Jason mentioned and more, which you can find those notes at giantrobots.fm. If you have questions or comments, email us at host@giantrobots.fm. You can find me on Mastodon at cpytel@thoughtbot.social. This podcast is brought to you by Thoughtbot. Jason, thanks again for joining me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me, Chad. Good conversation.
And thank you for listening. See you next time.